Hello everybody and welcome back to Chess Diagnostic. This is my first video in a long time, and I've been playing and studying a lot of chess in 2020 towards the end, and now I'm kind of getting really back into the swing of things. I've played a ton of games, and I'm just going to make a video about the best game that I played in 2020, and basically it's not a perfect game, of course, but I played it against Komodo54, who's kind of an opponent I've played over the years, and it was a rapid game, so it's somewhat high quality, and I'll just get into it here. So let me flip the board. All right. So I was black after d4. We see d5 and c4, e6. So kind of go into the Queen's Gambit declined, and transition into the Slav with c6, but then back into the Queen's Gambit declined after developed the knight, and then we see Queen's Gambit declined here. Okay, so normally a move like Queen to a5 is good because then you can play something like Knight to e4, but I just decided to keep it simple and play Bishop to d6, which technically isn't the best move, but it's very logical. Although bishop to e7 is probably a little better because it relieves the pin, and the bishop can be a little awkward here. I guess there's always ideas of like c5 or even just takes. So he does take, and lately I've been taking with the e-pawn, and I just like the feel of it, which basically the idea is you castle, you move the rook on the e-file, you move the knight, and then you can move the knight either to e6 or g6 and kind of free up your position there. That's the main problem in the Queen's Gambit decline or even the semi-Slav, is it's kind of hard to free yourself with your minor pieces. It's a little awkward with the pawn on c6 and the knight on b7. This light square bishop can be a bad bishop. All right, so he just develops, castles, and then queen to c2, obviously threatening to take here. And so I just played h6. He goes back. Now, the reason I like this game is because, obviously it worked out well for me, but it also illustrates the application of kind of the general ideas of piece activity. And it's really a practical tactics kind of game because a lot of times, it's unclear of where you should go in a game, and there's a lot of moves, and you're not really always going to have a two-move combination that kind of solves the game, especially as you play better players. So I follow with my plan, rook to e8, he castles, knight to f8, and now my main plan is to play bishop to g4, and then bring it back, and then try to trade off this light square bishop. And white's plan with rook to b1 is obviously to create a weak pawn on c6 by playing b4, b5. And so I try to prevent that with a5, and he just continues with his plan, and I continue with mine. And that's kind of a main thing in chess, is that, other than just making a sudden blunder with tactics, you're going to make a lot of plans in chess, and they're not going to be perfect plans. So you really should just focus on sticking to your plan, even if you're unsure. I think even a bad plan is better than no plan. So these very simple plans, I'm going to try to make more videos about that in the future, because I realize how important that is with playing, because a lot of times you make blunders because you're not really following any plan. You're not sure what to do, and that's definitely an application of knowledge, but you could just do it even if you don't know anything. You could just say, okay, I'm going to play on the queen side and try to push pawns, which is what white's doing in this game. All right, so I was putting pressure on f3, and notice just on your own understanding of activity, a move back reduces this knight's activity. He just took the knight away from these squares, and it's not so serious. You can see the evaluation is dead equal, but, you got to look at those kind of moves as a violation. So this is where you can kind of have an educational moment. So you can look at what the computer suggests. All right, so the computer doesn't really like white's idea of playing b4, so he just suggests even just developing the rook. So very simple, very logical. So after bishop, All right, let me turn that off. It's kind of distracting to me. Okay, so bishop to h5, and now I'm planning bishop to g6 and try to trade off. A very simple idea. And now we see e4. It seems logical he's trying to play in the center and break, but actually it's a big mistake. And I played a move here that the computer doesn't necessarily consider the best. Now, logically, just bringing this knight in, which is a pretty inactive piece, would make more sense. You could play something like knight to e6 and hit d4. But I started immediately calculating, if you want to try to figure out what the move is, I guess I should close that, but I went for bishop takes h2. And the line that I calculated in the game was bishop takes, king takes, and then knight to g4 check. And now the king has a choice. If he goes back, then I can take here, and I've just won a pawn. And otherwise, if he tries to hang on to this bishop, then he drives his king further into more problems. I saw if he comes king here, then I have something like queen to d7 with a really bad discovered check threatened. And if he comes to g3, then I can just simply play g5 and win the bishop back, even though it kind of ruins my pawn structure. I figured that would be adequate compensation for driving the king out. Now, I didn't really calculate further than that, so I just went for it. And this is where kind of simple tactics comes into play. It doesn't necessarily get you a mate, but you can just calculate that, okay, you know, I see that the king is being driven out, and that's exactly what happened here. So the king went to g3, and then I played g5. So now I'm going to win that bishop back with check. Let's look at this other line. If he went here, then queen to d7 just caused a lot of problems. He's going to have to go to g3 anyway, and I could just play g5 from there with a slightly more active queen. So that's why he chose king to g3. Now, practically, the computer might consider another move better, but realistically, for a player, it's hard to deal with these kind of threats because maybe just, chess definitely has a psychological component, and when your king is being threatened, it can be hard. So I played g5, and then he played here. He played the pawn forward, trying to open up his bishop, and it looks like he suddenly has to race to get some pieces over. So after check, here, now I could play some move. It looks like, just knight to e6 is the move I chose. I played knight to e6, and the idea is to just play knight to g5 check, and then get a discovered check. Now, it's kind of hard to defend here for white, but I saw that if he plays f4, I have the simple fork, and with the three minor pieces, I do have some weak pawns, but I'd win an exchange with his white weakened king. I figured that would be adequate. So I didn't really calculate further than that, and he actually didn't play the best defense. He played another knight back, which seems kind of a weak idea to get his knight over to the king's side, but it doesn't work in time. And now it's a mate in 6, if you want to try to calculate it from here. It's kind of cool. It drives the king into the center of the board. All right, so it starts with g5. He takes, and then you have a double discovered check. Now, if he takes here, then you get checkmate right there. And so he has to go back here. And now queen check. Now the king could go here, but you still get a discovered check and a mate. And so he just takes the knight, discovered check. Now notice the queen's covering all these squares here. The bishop's checking. The only square is here, but then that leaves another double discovered check with mate on knight to c4. And notice, I really love this position. I mean, it was fun to play, but it's really educational because you have the three minor pieces, the queen, kind of blocking the knight, blocking the king's path. And, you know, if the bishop wasn't here, he can move over. So you can just see how the white king's activity was very high, but the white minor pieces, queen and rook's activity was very low. They're just sitting on the first rank. They really have no squares to move to. Now, if we go back here, yeah, I mean, he could play f4 or even just bishop check, but it doesn't really do much. If he checks here, you just go over, and then he could play f4. I still get the fork. All right, so in fairness to my opponent, he did just play a game against Badur Jobava, who's 2600, 2700 grandmaster, and so I'm actually going to show that game just in fairness to him. This player Komodo 54. When I first played him, I thought it was a computer, but actually he's made progress over the past 4 years from about 2000 to quite a high level. So I've had fun playing him over the years. All right, we see Komodo here is white, and we see Jobava go for a Benoni. Now, the Benoni is quite dynamic, but basically black accepts a very cramped and quite uncomfortable position for, it appears, not much compensation. And he's basically just trying to attack from the wings and not get mated or not lose a ton of material. He has this weak d6 pawn. Now, Jobava makes a blunder, attacking the bishop and just giving away a pawn. All right, so then he just tries to win back his pawn, but look at this center. Very active for white. And this is quite an educational game, too, because you can see even a grandmaster who violates the ideas of piece activity can lose pretty quick. He's made multiple moves with his queen to win back a pawn, and his pieces, he moved a knight to the rim. The knight to the rim is dim, as they say. Takes, trying to free his position. Now white's very active, and the queen doesn't really have many squares to go to. All right, so at this point, you can see that the valuation changes. Black could have just traded, and that would have been the best thing to do, because then he can try to free himself, like, takes, and then he could play bishop to f5, and just try to, the material's otherwise equal. Maybe he even has a pawn, an extra pawn, so. But Jobava decides to keep his queen with queen to c4. And as you can see how active white is actually, he's going to get his queen trapped after these moves. Threatening bishop takes f7. He takes anyway, and then Jobava has to give up his queen. And then he just resigned after these moves here. So a very interesting game, and I'm not trying to bag on a grandmaster, of course. Of course, they play incredible games, but I like to see games where you can apply kind of general principles and have educational moments. And it's not so good to think that these things are so basic when if you apply them on a high level, then they're actually the highest level chess that you can play, even if you're playing against a grandmaster. So don't let that get you down if you're not playing too well or you blunder a lot, because you just have to improve your thought process to apply these principles better. That's really all it is. It's not something so complicated. All right, so my whole purpose of this channel is to try to break down chess, try to diagnose chess problems, and I really am going to get back into that. And I think making these videos, when I really get back into it, really kind of pushes my game to a new level. So I'm going to start doing that, maybe some more live streams, but I do just want to get back into making high-quality videos. So thanks for watching, thanks for sticking around, and I hope you stick around with me for 2021. I'm going to be creating a lot more content. So I'll see you in the future. Bye-bye.